BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening. I'm Andrew Petrie, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Wednesday, the 30th of July. First up, Rangers are in the driving seat in Athens.
I think we've had a really good week since last Tuesday. We've learned a lot from that game, and I think the players are really ready to put in a better performance and a performance that enables us to go through.
Russell Martin's side are 2 goals to the good in their Champions League second round qualifying tie with Panathinaikos. Of course, they're not the only Scottish side in European action.
Hibs claim it across the line, and the referee says yes, it did. And McGrath, within 6 minutes of his Hibs debut, has put his side in front direct from the free kick.
Hibs face FC Midtjylland at Easter Road with the scoreline all square. And last, but by no means least,
infield, good pass to Sapsford, it's through the legs, he's up to the edge of the box, it's Sapsford with a strike! And Zach Sapsford gets United season up and running.
Dundee United take a 1-goal advantage to Luxembourg.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
3 tasty ties to sink our teeth into, and joining me to tuck into the European treats, we have the Times Scottish football correspondent Michael Grant and football coach and analyst John Walker. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. We'll just jump straight into it and we'll go over to Greece, where Rangers take a 2-0 lead into their second leg against Panathinaikos. It was a terrific result for Russell Martin in his home competitive debut as Rangers boss, John, but it wasn't always easy watching. I spoke to Craig Levine last week during the Hartlepool-Barton game, and he said he thought Rangers started terribly. What did you make of their performance?
I would have said it was a slow but expected start. I think there's players in that changing room, especially the ones that already existed there last year, that have been kind of craving a style, some direction from the previous managerial team. I think it's just getting used to that. I think there's players that aren't going to be able to do it, unfortunately, but I think it's just getting used to that style. It's going to be, we knew this from the get-go, it's going to be an eye-opener for fans who don't go every week. I sit kind of close to hospitality in the Governorshire, and you could feel the nervousness every time we tried to play out from the back. All these little things that will take time to develop. So there was a few mistakes, high turnovers that were leading Panathinaikos, but I think the biggest thing for me was that anything good from Panathinaikos was directly attributable to us making a mistake, not necessarily them breaking us down or opening us up, which is kind of gave me a little bit of confidence about tonight with a 2-goal lead.
And that's it, Michael. We know kind of what Russell Martin's style is from some of his previous clubs, and John mentioned it there. There is the risk that balls do get given away in dangerous areas. Is that something he has to tweak to have success in Europe? It may well work in Scotland, but will it translate to the European stage? And are there any kind of similarities maybe to Ange Postecoglou's Celtic?
Yeah, I mean, I think Russell Martin's style of play, it can be successful and it can be attractive, but I think it will always be prone to those kind of mistakes and leading to the potential to be punished. And obviously, the European games, you're more likely to get punished than you are in domestic games. Celtic have shown that for years, that you can get away with errors in league football and cup football in Scotland, but you can't really get away with many in Europe. Panathinaikos weren't particularly impressive in that first leg, but it's still a dangerous draw for Rangers. I think that was evident from the moment they were paired together. And this game still does carry a bit of danger for Rangers. And what they'll need to do, and to their credit, they have shown this before under previous managers, is to handle a difficult environment, it'll be hot in Athens. The crowd will be over 40,000. I know that's only going to be about half the stadium full because they've moved the game to the National Stadium. So it's a test of character for this team, and as John says, it's a new team playing a new style, and that does make them vulnerable. But 2 goals is a nice cushion to have in the second leg.
And I think John Russell Martin kind of gave away in his pre-match press conference that he isn't really going to change his style. As a Rangers fan, how does that make you feel? Does it depend on the outcome? Is it naive if it doesn't work, but really steadfast if it does?
I think that's pretty much nailed on, and that will be he'll live by that or die by that as Rangers manager, or any job he takes going forward. He died by it out at Southampton, but I think you could see improvements in what they were doing at Southampton as games went on, despite the mental result against Spurs that lost him his job. I think for us, I know Panathinaikos went down to 10 men, but I think the 10 men was kind of an eye-opener to what Panathinaikos can look like when they're trying to go for teams or chase teams or attack a bit more when they're down and when they've got those spaces. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they're like as a team coming out from the get-go, especially without Viaginidis, who was a high contributor to goals from right back, and even his yellow card for diving. You can see how high up the park he is to be pivotal to their attacking team. I think Russell Martin's always been quite clear. His style will always stay, but there'll be little tweaks. I think they'll have looked at the areas in which they lost the ball from the Panathinaikos press and try and avoid those areas. So we might see fullbacks maybe a little wider to start. But I don't know. I think if they come out the traps and try and go for us, I think you'll find more spaces for us to get our wide players in those attacking areas that saw us get the 2 goals, which is the kind of the positive for me.
And Michael, would you expect any changes in the lineup? Obviously, the 18-year-old Finlay Curtis is really impressed. I believe he was very good at the weekend in their friendly as well.
Yeah, I think Curtis will start again unless I'm unaware of any injuries or tweaks. Gassama obviously is an option as well. Rangers. Martin himself has said that in 3 or 4 weeks' time he still thinks the team will look very different in terms of signings coming in. There are obvious areas that Rangers need to address: left back, right wing, centre forward if anybody leaves. But at the moment, you can only go with the squad that you've got for the first leg. So there won't be any huge changes. I think Igamani hasn't travelled and Asgard hasn't travelled as well. So I don't think there'll be that many changes, Andrew. It's such a test to come so early in a manager's reign, isn't it? Martin's only been there, 50, 60 days in at the club. He's made a raft of new signings. He's trying to change the culture. He's trying to impose an entire new style of play. And this is such a difficult test to come so early. I think John referred there to starting well, and I think that has been a factor so far. They haven't started well in the friendlies and in the first leg, and obviously the danger with that in Athens is that you lose a goal early, you lose possibly even 2 goals in the first half, and suddenly the tie has a different momentum. Panathinaikos have their tails up, and it could become a fraught night. But that's almost the kind of worst case scenario, and you would imagine and hope for Rangers' sake that they will be able to start getting better as the team gets more familiar with itself and more familiar with the manager.
And finally, on Rangers, and I'm going to do this with every single game that we're covering today, gentlemen, so get ready for it. But what is your prediction for this one? John, I'll start with you.
1-1 draw. Rangers will go through. I think Panathinaikos have been fairly low scorers at home under this manager. I think there's only one game where they would have won in 90 minutes where they would go through against Rangers, a couple that would have went to extra time. I think the biggest fear for me is just the Fiorentina result, the 3-2 game where they could have put 5 or 6 past Fiorentina. Outside of that, Rangers went to Olympiacos, got a 1-1 draw. I think so. I would take something similar. I don't know if my heart or my head's leading that, but I'll go 1-1.
And Michael, what about you?
I think Rangers will go through. I'm not too sure. 1-1, they might lose 2-1. Listen, we're still learning. We're still learning about Russell Martin. We're still learning about the team. So, if they were to be knocked out, wouldn't be the hugest surprise in the world. But I think the second goal gave them such a cushion and comfort last week. So, I think Rangers will go through.
Right, next up we travel to Easter Road where Hibs face FC Midtjylland. That tie is finally poised after the 1-1 draw in Denmark. Michael, this looked like a really tough assignment when it came out the hat, but Hibs can take a lot of credit for coming home with a draw. Were you surprised by that result?
Yeah, I suppose I was. I think both of those points are true, Andrew. It did look a tough assignment, but Hibs were really impressive. I think both of those facts are true. And listen, I still think it's a tough assignment. I think of the three games that we're going to discuss in this pod, I think the Hibs one is potentially the one that's still most in the balance. And I say that not to criticise Hibs remotely, but to kind of acknowledge the quality of the opposition. Midtjylland's season is up and running, and they are scoring goals. They've played 2 league games and scored 9 times. So it's within their capabilities to come to Easter Road and win. What I found impressive about Hibs was, there just feels like a good vibe around this team and this club at the moment. That first leg very much felt like a continuation of the way things have gone for the club since about November. There's momentum, there's confidence there. They're a hard-working team. They do a lot of running, they do a lot of pressing. And also, when you look at it, there was only two new faces in that side. We're talking about Rangers making a lot of changes over the summer. We'll come to Dundee United, who have made even more. But Hibs had Mulligan in and they had McGrath in, both of whom I think played well in the first leg. But otherwise, it was 9 out of 11 who had been a winning unit together. So I think this is the most interesting of the second legs, because it could still go either way, and the fact that it's a sellout at Easter Road will be really intriguing.
Michael, you mentioned Jamie McGrath there. John, it was a dream start for him, scored on his debut. It was a strange goal. If you've not seen it, he kind of crosses it in. Jonas Lossell, the Midtjylland goalkeeper, doesn't seem to get a good read on it, has to parry it away. By that point, it's already crossed the line. Jamie McGrath's half celebrating. Do you think he could be a really big player for Hibs this season?
Yeah, I think the 2 players that Michael mentioned that Hibs have signed have been absolute belters. I think that's where Hibs have done well, because I think anyone that watched Hibs in that incredible run last year, you could see that David Gray really, really, really seemed to understand the tactical side of football, which I think is something that some managers seem to lack. They all have an idea as to what they want to do, but that kind of tactical tweak, and that's why they got results against Rangers and Celtic last year. I think adding 2 players who can actually come in to the starting 11 and change the team. I think McGrath's somebody that I've always kind of felt, especially from dead balls, is a very impressive technician. Mulligan, I think, for the running that Michael talked about, there's nobody better than that. He's like a Scottish version of Gareth Bale from what he can offer, like running from deep with the ball and taking you up the pitch. I think this is a game that really, I think this is like a better draw for Hibs than if they'd got a team that would have let them have the ball. I think this is kind of the way that Hibs have performed well against Rangers and Celtic last year has kind of put them in good stead for a team that's going to have most of the ball against them again, and let Hibs do their high press, catch teams out in high areas, and how quickly they can transition into counter-attacks and score goals, which is the most important part. Unlucky, obviously, not to be 2-0 up in the first half. I think this is a really, really exciting one. Looking forward to watching that. I think Hibs could really surprise a few people here and go and actually do this, because this should be one of the biggest Scottish scouts outside of Old Firm teams playing in Europe if Hibs can turn them over, because they're a really impressive side.
Well, one player who they've brought in to hopefully score goals is record signing Thibaut Klidja. Now, he came off the bench last week. Michael, should we expect to see him from the start?
Possibly. I haven't seen enough of him to know, whether he's sharp and fit and ready to go. You've not spent that much money for a guy to sit on the bench, let's be honest. But Martin Boyle was excellent in the first leg. Jimmy McGrath obviously scored. Bowie was impressive last season. He's a young guy who's got plenty to offer Hibs and will have. Whether Klidja starts or not, he's certainly an option. And as I say, you're not spending £1 million for a guy to be a bit part player. He's going to be a starter for Hibs this season when he's fit. Or else they've spent a lot of money and got it wrong. But I don't know. I mean, obviously him for Bowie, I guess, would be the switch if they want. But there wasn't much wrong with that first leg team,
Absolutely. And of course, the big reward for Hibs is what looks like an easier tie against Fredrikstad of Norway if they go through. Michael, will David Gray be thinking about that at all, or is that something that he's kind of got to put out of his mind?
Yeah, I'll have to put it out of his mind. I mean, the problem, of course, is that the games come so thick and fast at the moment that you're almost. I would imagine that Hibs will have some staff looking at the potential opponents already, because it's a either or situation, isn't it? It's either Europa League or it's Conference League, and I mean, I think the next round's next week, isn't it? Am I right? I think it's consecutive Thursdays for up until you get through the playoffs. So you can't completely start cold in terms of your research and your data. But having said all that, there'll be staff that'll be taking care of that. David Gray has to concentrate on getting through this tie, which I still think carries a lot of danger for Hibs.
Certainly does. I asked you for your predictions in the last game, John. You used a lot of logic then. What's your logic behind your prediction for this one?
I think Hibs will go through. I think Hibs have got enough on the counter-attack to trouble them. I think it'll be a game that fans might not enjoy. I think fans might expect Hibs, because they're still at home, might have a lot of the onus and go and attack. And I think Hibs will be quite comfortable repeating what happened last week and using their fans to carry them to like extra legs in the transition, extra legs. I don't know how they'll go through. I just get this feeling with David Gray that he's kind of destined to push things forward at Hibs, and I think this is a big step for it. I think the run last year, beating Rangers and stuff and beating Celtic, having good performances, I think this is the one that he'll kind of stamp his authority. So I think Hibs will go through, but I have no idea how that's going to happen.
And Michael, what about you?
You know what, Andrew? I am determined to say that all three Scottish teams will go through from this podcast. But all I will say is that Hibs is the one I'd probably worry about most.
Last up, it's Dundee United. They take a slender 1-0 lead into their away match with Strassen in Luxembourg. John, they probably would have wanted more of a cushion from the home leg. Is that being a little bit harsh on a relatively unknown opponent to most of us? Or do United genuinely have cause for disappointment here?
So I think it's the thing I alluded to with the Hibs. I think Hibs tie is perfectly suited to Hibs. I think if they had got a team like Strassen, where they're expected to dominate the ball and expected to have more of the ball, it may be been harder to figure out how to break teams like that down who are going to sit and frustrate. I think Dundee United experienced that. I think sometimes Scottish teams who, when they play against Rangers Celtic, only have an idea how to stop Rangers Celtic, whereas Hibs have had an implement to go, yep, we know how to stop them. Now how do we go and punish them when we get the ball? I think that's the thing I've liked about Hibs and David Gray's side. I think this is where Dundee United might struggle. I hope they don't, but might struggle in that they looked like they really were kind of, when they got into that final third, I felt like it was half chances they were creating. There wasn't really any like really opening. There wasn't sustained pressure where I felt it was going to go 2-3-4-5. I felt like the other team were in the game, although they didn't create much themselves. I expect Dundee United to be able to scrape through this one, but yeah, I think it's one of those ones. It's like St Mirren playing Brann. I think the fans probably were naive to think that they were evenly matched when they didn't really know how to break them down, and when they got them back to Norway, they punished them. I don't know if Strassen quite have that quality. I think Dundee United will have enough to dig in.
Michael, do you agree with that? Or how much of a kind of banana skin can these kind of ties be? And is the reality that United will actually do pretty well to dodge that banana skin?
Well, listen, we've seen it year after year after year, haven't we? You know, that Scottish teams muck things up against teams that they really should be beating. And that's not to dismiss the Luxembourg side. I mean, I think they did show moments of quality and they built some decent counter-attacking moves last season. But let's be honest, they're ordinary and they're limited. And a club with Dundee United's resources should be able to take care of them. Where the United are vulnerable, I think, is that they are such a work in progress. They are so early in terms of coming together. I think it's been 11 signings this summer. 7 started last week. So, I mean, any club has the potential, any team has the potential to improve quite significantly in a week, you know. And United will, I don't know if they have to dramatically improve, but they can certainly give themselves a bit more comfort by improving. They were giving the ball away too easily in the first leg, which is a kind of habitual fault for Scottish teams in Europe, you know. Listen, they should have enough to take care of this side, but you just, again, you're a little bit nervous because you've seen so many teams from Scotland muck it up at this stage of the season in these kind of ties, where everybody says, well, they should have too much, but they don't.
And Michael touched upon it there. 11 summer signings so far for Dundee United, John. 7 starting last week. Were you surprised by the number of changes that Jim Goodwin has made to this United team? You normally see that number of players, that high a turnover from a team finishing far lower down the league. You think of Ross County and St Johnstone kind of summer after summer. But yet United finishing the top 6, and yet it's all change.
Yeah, I think he's probably seen a few teams really struggle with the extra load early on of European football. When teams have done well to get in there, St Mirren, etc., they've kind of had to fall off in those early months, which have meant they've had to play catch-up. St Mirren were very good to play catch-up last year and get themselves back into that top 6 for the third time in a row. I think he probably realises he needs a bigger squad. I'm surprised at how many came straight into starting so early on, because I'm seeing that with Rangers, but Rangers is kind of more forced on them. So I was surprised. But again, he got a result. Maybe that's part of the disconnect with giving the ball away and not quite having the style fully implemented, because you're kind of having to use these European games as part of pre-season as well, which isn't ideal when Scotland demands so highly that the coefficient keeps growing. But maybe he's just realised that the squad would be deficient and needed those improvements, and those players have come in and he's been so impressed that they need to go ahead of the people that were already there.
And Michael, a lot was made of the fact that United had no Scots in their starting 11, seemingly for the first time in their history. All those nationalities. Is Jim Goodwin almost making his job a little bit harder? And also, do you think the kind of outcry about that was justified?
First of all, that was a really good point you made about it's unusual to see a team change so much when it's had such a good debut season and finished so high. I think Goodwin talked about wanting to lower the kind of average age of the squad and get more athleticism in, and he seems to have done that with signings that are all, it's kind of land of the giant stuff, I think, from what we've seen. In terms of the non-Scots, I can't say I get too agitated about that, Andrew. I mean, the other leading clubs don't have many Scots. Actually, Rangers have got a fair representation. Celtic have got Tierney and McGregor. Aberdeen don't really have many beyond Shinnie. Ross Graham would have been playing for United had he been fit. The young lad Owen Sturton came off the bench and played well. Listen, it's unfortunate. It's a negative headline. Obviously, we're inclined to say that, throw our hands in the air and say, what does this say about Scottish football? But, you're talking about the difference between playing one Scot or playing no Scots. It's unfortunate, but I don't read an awful lot into it. I think Jim Goodwin, like any manager, has to concentrate on the immediacy of results to keep himself in a job, frankly. And as I say, when Graham's back, United will have their Scot in the team, and the issue will kind of fade away.
A bit of a storm in a teacup, perhaps. Right, once again, gentlemen, it's that time for predictions. John, what are you going for?
Dundee United to win 1-0.
Okay, very, very sure of that one, clearly. Michael, what do you think?
I think that sounds plausible. I think United will go through, but again, negative here. But it's just that fear that there's the annual. I was going to say something. I would say kick up the backside that Scottish football gets. So hopefully United avoid that, because obviously, listen, Rangers are playing Panathinaikos, an established European club, a substantial club. Same goes for Midtjylland. So the embarrassment potential is there for United because they're not up against a kind of name club. But I'm with John. I think they'll have enough to go through.
There we go. Will Unastrassen join the ranks of Unarea, Urziceni and Birkirkara, teams that Scottish football fans will remember for years to come?
Hey, your list could go on forever, Andrew. Your list teams of embarrassed Scots.
It certainly could. Right, that's all we've got time for. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day. So to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Finally, it's a big thank you to my guests and a big thank you to you, the listener. Goodbye.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. all the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.